You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
Maybe we'll listen.
Lovers Rock.
You just keep saying things. Damn it!
Would you like to explain what we're doing here?
What are we doing here? This is the podcast. If we named our podcast differently, I would name this one like
Doom.
The Cursed Podcast. The podcast that the universe does. Guys, the universe doesn't want this information to get out.
Definitely doesn't. But why?
The
information.
The first one didn't record.
No, the
first one was me, and I didn't.
The first
we
one
found
did
out what it
record.
was.
The first one did record, but then we were like, oh, it didn't record. Oh no, it did. Okay, that was like the introduction.
Yeah, we paused it. Then we were like, right, let's do the actual book bit of the podcast, and then we talked for about 90 minutes.
Oh my god, it was the best. Listeners, you just have to believe it was the best podcast we've ever done.
Yeah,
it's absolutely flipping incredible. It was
Goodbye.
profound. It was great.
It was great.
And then it didn't record.
Because
and then
but that one was on me.
Yeah.
Because there's something wrong with our equipment.
And then we tried to do it over Zoom, and then I was downstairs in my living room, and then my family decided that they really, really needed the living room, and I had to pause it quite a few times to go, oh, but no, please come up in the living room, this is where the Wi-Fi is the best. So then I moved, and then it was fine, we started again, and then the dog was just barking incessantly, so I was like, just let me pause to go and sort out the dog, and then my family just were like, no, you're not podcasting now.
Yeah.
So
the universe said no. And to be fair, people who have listened to enough episodes of this are going to know that it's hard enough for us to stay on a point when we're not doing anything else.
Yeah.
So to try and keep going back to what we're saying, or to remember anything we've just... Like, we probably fixed the education system in that first one. We probably fixed it.
I think so.
We're like those people that just didn't write it down. You know, like we got really... You know, had just like, the world, it all makes sense. And we just...
I know.
Haven't got it.
And even this morning, we were about to record outside in our like kitcheny bit in the woods, and then it started to rain.
Just as we were like, let's
pod, we're ready. Pod. And then the rain came and it made a horrible noise on the roof, so now we're in the cabin. So if anything happens in the cabin now, like what could happen? It could catch fire.
It could catch fire. Fingers crossed. Struck by lightning.
Infestation of rodents and squirrels. And
it might get blown over.
Yeah. Massive branch.
One of us might spontaneously explode. What do you want me to do if you spontaneously explode? If you spontaneously go in front of me.
Cook something really good.
Just throw all this stuff behind me.
Just cook like the best pancakes on the flames.
Yeah, but you know when a bit of ash gets in the food.
What do you do when that happens?
Well, no. Anyway. Yeah, but if it's you, if the ashes, I don't want to eat.
You don't want to eat my ashes. Why? That's in my will. Where do you want ashes scattered? In Lewis's dinner.
Just to end a decade of veganism real well.
Just eat that. But is it still meat if it's ash? I don't think it is.
Isn't there a thing? This is well done. We've gone off topic. Isn't there a thing that like ashes? There's no part of a human that can actually turn into ashes. Like it all genuinely combusts. And they do like these occasional studies where they're like, we got someone's pot of their grandma's ashes, and it had 4 different types of DNA in it and a bit of dog. And like it's just like there's no way to like clean a thingy. Yeah. You know, what is it? Campfire. Enough that you can go. That's just it's just anyway.
Random bits. Wood lice, centipedes.
Everything. All this.
Dust. Yeah.
Gut biomes.
But you don't really care though when you're dead, do you?
No, but the people who've got a box and they think it's you.
I don't know.
It's okay.
I wouldn't care.
You wouldn't care.
It's just the ceremony of it, isn't it?
Applications for Forest School training are now open at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Anyhow, right, okay.
Right,
I'm on it now.
The book, because...
The book that we're talking about today, for the 5th time, is the Declarative Language Handbook. I can't believe we're doing this all again. No, this is the last time I'm going to say this.
Yeah, okay, this is fine. This is the final performance.
I'm excited.
I'm going to bring you roses at the end.
Oh, yes.
Everything else has been a matinee.
Yes. Using a thoughtful language style to help kids with social learning challenges feel competent, connected and understood, by Linda K. Murphy. It's all right, I'm recording it on this phone as well.
Yes.
So if that one breaks,
It's not going to.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was recommended this book by Sam Harris, who near to us, they're based in Exeter. BISNet, which stands as BIS-net, which stands for the Behaviour and Inclusion Support Network, I think. And they're really, really good, and they run lots of courses, and now you can do them all on Zoom. So even if you don't live in Devon, you should be able to access their stuff, and it's really good. So I've done a few courses with them, and this book came up as a useful resource. And it isn't necessarily just sort of recommended for children and young people who are autistic, although that is
It doesn't
covered.
say, well...
It is, I like the way, in the subheading, help kids with social learning challenges.
That's what I was going to say. I don't know that they necessarily... Do they mention autism in it? Because I was reading the whole thing going like, oh, this is interesting that someone's written it intentionally. I'm guessing if it's not in there, it's got to be intentional to go, I'm not going to use that term.
Well, it's a bit like Explosive Child, isn't it? That it's not really about diagnoses, because...
That's one factor that can be in lots of different diagnoses.
Exactly. And you've got a diagnosis, and then what? Then you need some strategies to be able to help those young people. So,
and you get, and because all this stuff is, I use the term you like, spectrum-y or constellations, there are people who are not in any of those categories that might be identified by a Senko, but have social challenges.
Well, and that's the thing, especially at the moment, we all really have social learning challenges because we've all been in lockdown and not been with people other than our family for months on end. So right now, basically every child that is...
You lose sense of what's appropriate. You start talking about how you want someone to eat your ashes.
Exactly.
Because you've gone insane in isolation.
Yes. So, children haven't been in any kind of setting, or lots of, not every child, some children have, but even the kids that have been in settings haven't been in settings with a gabillion kids. They've been in a setting with a few children, and maybe the kind of rules and the structure of the day has been different, and all that kind of stuff.
And all the stuff that happens outside of school, which should be the majority of social interaction. All the after school clubs or birthday parties and all social events have been missing.
Yeah, completely.
But it's a recent book, isn't it?
It is 2020, and she, the author, is a relationship development intervention, RDI consultant, and declarative language sort of came up in her training to become one of those consultants, and then she realised there was no handbook for it, so she decided to write one. And I sort of try to summarise what she says declarative language is useful for. So in kind of my own word summary, as a bullet point, so declarative language with children who have social learning challenges, first of all, doesn't activate the fight, flight, freeze and fawn response, which lots of people will be familiar with.
I knew about fight and flight, and then I guess if I had thought about it, I would have been like, oh yeah, I'm aware of freeze. Fawn, I've not come across.
Yeah.
But you have a good explanation of it.
Yeah, so fawning would be a response, so the equivalent, so if we understand the kind of fight, flight, freeze as being not just like an anxiety-inducing situation, but a situation which sort of activates that really primal
bit of your brain,
that is like, I am in extreme peril. How am I going to do that? How am I going to deal with it? What systems do I need to shut down, and how do I need to cope? So running away, fighting the danger, all of those kind of like really primal reactions. But fawning would equate to you're in a situation where you're in a cage with a very hungry tiger, and either you punch that tiger in the face, or you try and run away and escape.
Or you stand completely still.
And don't arouse its attention. Yeah. Or you wriggle around and find a juicy steak and go, here you go, tiger, here's a lovely steak. Don't eat me because look at the lovely steak, little tiger, it's so nice. And you just do whatever it takes to make that danger calm itself down and not kill you, which completely makes sense. And maybe we were talking about how it might be harder to spot if you are working with young people and that they're using the fawning response a lot. But I kind of thought that it's very similar. It could be seen as very similar to masking. So if you're describing sort of masking behaviour where it's those children who are fine in school, absolutely fine with me, and then get home and have an absolute explosion because they've been masking all day and it's been taking all of their energy to do so. So whether you could see fawning as being part of that in terms of like, I'm not going to get on that behaviour chart and I'm just going to do, you want me to write 3 paragraphs by the end of 10 minutes? That's absolutely fine. Yeah. I am going to write 3, and not just paragraphs, but perfect paragraphs, because heaven forfend I erase any
and with the like precision that you would write it if a tiger was stalking you.
Completely.
You know, that nerve and like, I won't make a mistake. There's 2 bits to it though, isn't there? Because I think there's one part which is realising that those responses now don't just come to physical threats and risks. So acknowledging that you can have a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response to a social risk is one sort of like an academic jump, a theoretical jump that you have to make in your brain, because as we all know, your body doesn't know the difference between like a shitty email and a tiger. Your body still goes like fucking run, which is like and then you don't run, and then your heart rate goes up, and then at the end of the day you've had 15 emails and you're like, why is my blood pressure so high? But the other bit is like, I think it'd be really hard for educators who aren't used to reflecting,
or don't have the time to
reflect. All the caveats in the world, right? I'm not bashing these people. But to reflect that you might be a threat to children is something that you just have to... Sometimes is a hard thing to acknowledge if you've worked really hard and your whole thing is like, I'm a very open teacher, I'm at my play group, everybody can come to me and do whatever. And sometimes you have to go, through nothing you have done or not done or can ever do, that child, learner, whatever, sees you as a risk. Your requests, your presence is a social threat to them.
Yeah.
And you can't change it. You can't just be like, yes, but I smile and I knelt down. Like, no, you're still a threat to them.
Yeah.
So then, and that's quite hard to kind of go like, oh,
it is. I want to talk about like authority at the end.
Yeah.
So we'll probably come back to that.
But sorry, like, I was derating you on the responses.
No, not at all. No, because I think that was important to talk about. But another reason why it's useful is that it gives opportunities for independent problem-solving skills, which we'll talk about in a minute. Gives opportunities for visual referencing, which we'll also talk about in a minute. Empowers children. And reveals skills and thought processes which are normally hidden. For example, talking through your own thought process when you make a mistake or you face a problem. So declarative language would be, the opposite of declarative language is imperative language. So sit down everyone, it's lunchtime.
Yeah. That
is not declarative language, that is imperative language. Declarative language would be, can you turn that, Lewis, from imperative into declarative?
Oh, sorry, you're asking me. Like, it's just a statement of like, it's the end of break.
Yeah.
And kind of letting that, it's almost like letting the second half of the sentence go unsaid. Is just, but not unsaid. You're hoping that it happens in the learner's heads.
Exactly.
And so that's the unseen processing bit, isn't it?
And the empowering bit.
Yeah.
So another really good example in here is, so grandma is arriving, you and the child is at home, grandma is arriving, and imperative language is, say hello to grandma. So for a lot of people, not just children, adults, that any kind of demand, because of the way the brain is wired,
because there's a right or wrong,
is seen as it's an anxiety-inducing thing. Even a demand that you might say is really pleasant, like, come on, get your shoes on, we're going to the shop to buy sweets. You know, you might go, well, where's the anxiety-inducing element of that?
Yeah,
you know, it's a great thing. It's like, no, you have made a request that has to be complied with. You're making a demand on that person. And for some people's brains, that is incredibly unpleasant, painful, anxiety-inducing, awful. So say hello to grandma, you know, can be an incredibly violent thing to say to somebody. The opposite is, oh, grandma's here. Which then it doesn't activate the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, because you can just not react to that if you want. You can just it's just a statement of fact. It's just a true thing. It's empowering the child to then make their own decision about how they react to that statement. So
to take social cues from what other people are doing.
Yes.
That's the other one, isn't it? It's just going like, grandma's here. If your siblings all go and do something, you've got a choice, but also you can infer from what they're doing.
Well, that's the visual referencing element of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like drawing somebody's attention to something in a kind of non-violent way. You haven't got a specific expectation, but you are, especially if they're very deep into something and may not have the ability or, you know, the process at the moment of being able to notice themselves. And then empowering them to make their own choice about how they respond to that. Yeah.
We were talking in one of the many other rehearsals of this podcast about the fawn response and the demand stuff, and saying that it would be in some ways easier for us to spot fawning in a child-led setting because we would quite quickly, I think, notice like, oh, that person's not contributing anything to the play, or like that person's doing whatever, you know, the person they're next to is telling them in that game, and just checking in and going like, you sure you happy doing that, which we do regularly. And if you, in a way that you might not notice it, in a sit at your desks, at your desks doing whatever, can very quickly, the fawning response can become like not a problem for me from a teaching point of view. That child's not a problem for me. They're not disruptive. They always hand in the right amount of stuff.
And even kind of, I'm just thinking actually about a child that I know really well. I'm just thinking about like comments that the teacher said, you know, in the end of year reports, so and so is just such a joy to have around. They're always so helpful. They always really help me to sort out the classroom.
Oh yeah, that weird thing of like, can I sharpen the pencils? Exactly. Can I clean the board? Can I do the thing?
Exactly.
Oh man.
I've just had a moment about that, and it's like, and all these things, like you could, you know, without kind of being kind of diagnostic about bloody everything.
Pew, 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 pew.
Like,
shooting diagnoses around the room.
Yeah.
You get a diagnosis.
Exactly.
You get a diagnosis. You get a diagnosis.
But that's the thing about learning about like neurodiversity, is that then you start like seeing it everywhere, and like
Well, that's why, like we said at the start of this book, is like they're just traits.
Yeah.
They're not like X means what. It's just like, all right, that's a thing. Some people have that thing.
Completely.
Some people do that thing.
Yeah, and to a greater or lesser extent, day by day, moment to moment, and but having an awareness of it, even if it means that sometimes you maybe go off in the deep end and go like, oh my god, it's everything, which is where I am right now. It's surely better than having no flipping awareness at all and going like, but.
Well, I talked before about one of the things that I want to do with my personal practice, pedagogy, all these things, is like to have everything that I do be intentional, and to try and not pick myself up, to just pick apart stuff that I'm doing and going, I don't want anything to be subconscious, because we've talked before about when you go into like a school, and if you're doing like work for a school, and then quite early on, you sometimes, if you're early on in your practice, you get that feeling of like, oh, I'm not doing anything. I'm not providing anything. I'm not doing anything.
You have to de-school yourself.
You have to de-school yourself, but also be ready to kind of go, well, actually, what my pedagogy is comes out in every facial expression, in every little comment that I make, in every question I do or don't ask, in terms of where I stand. That is part of my pedagogy. All these things, I want to be intentional. So I don't want to go like, and I found myself standing right next to a child. No, I want to be like, I was stood there because I'd thought about it and I'd unpicked all these things. And the imperative language thing is something that you can just fall into completely unconsciously, and because in lots of education settings it doesn't present a problem, and because you can quite quickly flip the problem away from yourself and go, well, it's not me. Like, it's not me. My pedagogy, my style of teaching, isn't working. It's like they don't like being told what to do. They
they've got a problem. And I can't deal with it. It's beyond my remit.
It's fine.
This book kind of links with The Explosive Child and what was one? The Ross Greene books. We did a podcast on them.
Oh, The Whole Brain Child. Yes, I know.
Yes.
I know the ones you mean. Sorry, those ones.
So you read the one that was more school-based. And I read the more parenting one.
Is it Lost in School? Lost at School?
Something like that, yeah.
This stuff doesn't stay in our heads, people.
No, but we know
the content does, the names don't.
Yes, so really ties into. So if you've read that, this is like a really good companion book. As is so the non-violent communication, Marshall Rosenberg stuff really links in with this, and Alfie Kohn as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of following on from what you've said, there's an example in Explosive Child, or the one that you read, about a child who has a problem lining up. So the explosive child would be like lagging skills, or like, you know, having a conversation with the child where instead of just seeing the behaviour and going, oh my god, that kid is always like punching people in the line when they have to line up to go back into class, you really get to the bottom of like, but what is it that is causing that behaviour, rather than that child has a behaviour problem and it's sorting out. It's like, well, you know, you have to get to the bottom. You are doing something.
You are in that puzzle.
Yeah, like you just said, you know, you've got to be intentional, because it might not be your fault, but you have.
But if it's intentional, you consider it to be something that you can then change.
Yes.
If it's unintentional,
if you're doing it just because.
That's how I speak to kids or whatever. Then you're not able to change it. You're not able to go like, oh, this is the thing that's not working. You know, if you listed out the components of an interaction, anything subconscious wouldn't be on that list. So then you wouldn't think to fix it. So then it just spirals that way, doesn't it? So like, I think this book has been another puzzle piece for me in terms of like just chipping away at anything that I do unintentionally.
Yeah, definitely. So like that example of the child in the line who's like hitting out, and in The Explosive Child they give that example and they have the discussion and find out that that child
being stepped, is it?
It's like they get jostled in the line.
Yeah, somebody steps on my shoes or something like that.
I get pushed into, and I really don't like that. I don't like people like hitting my body. And so there's a sensory issue going on there. So you can remedy that. And they talk about similar kind of situations in this book where they say, instead of line up now, it's the end of thing. It's like, oh, I see everybody's lining up over there. And then it gives the child the kind of opportunity to go and line up, and that you might help them to line up in a way that suits them. Either it's at the back so that they're not getting jostled, or at the front, or slightly after everybody else. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of that like...
Well, it ties really, really closely into the Alfie Kohn stuff. No, not the Alfie Kohn stuff. Into the... it's like, like you said, Alfie Kohn and Marshall Rosenberg stuff. In that, similarly to saying everybody's lining up, and that's just a statement, you can do with that what you want. That's also how a lot of our behaviour management works, in terms of that person has a sad face. Right? You do with that information, not do with it what you want, because eventually, you know, you will go, this person isn't getting looked after, we'll step in and do whatever. But for the most part, just helping to kind of verbalise and narrate the world is the same as going, everybody's lining up, as that person looks very unhappy.
Yes.
And letting that, like we said, letting that second bit happen internally, so that eventually the second bit doesn't. The first bit almost doesn't need saying. Yeah. Because it just becomes internal.
Yeah. Well, kind of, should we move on to like, so the visual referencing instead of eye contact. So she's talking in here about... I
can't talk about eye contact without... I'm going to look out the window. Yeah, whenever you talk about eye contact, it becomes... Not you personally. Yeah. One talks about eye contact. You become very aware of it.
So a lot of people, if you're talking about like autistic people, eye contact will often come up as a kind of stereotypical autistic trait, that autistic people find eye contact really hard. And it's like, okay, well, whether or not you agree with that statement... then what she's kind of like, she's sort of examining that and going, but is it actually eye contact that is useful? And she's saying, well, no, it isn't actually eye contact that's useful. It's visual referencing. That is the skill that you're trying to support anybody with. So it's the ability, like we just said, to notice things that are happening in the world, whether it's so-and-so's got a sad face or everyone's lining up for lunch now, and then being able to process that information and then adapt your behaviour accordingly, in a way that is both socially acceptable and, you know, beneficial to you, you know. So she's sort of saying we need to stop asking young people to look at me. You know, that whole thing of like, oh, look at me, look at me, eyes on me, all of that thing. It's like
fingers on lips.
That's a demand. That's really violent. That, you know, somebody. It's not. You don't actually need somebody to meet your eye in order for a good.
I have a thought that's just crystallised.
What's that?
Do you think that that they tie together, in that so the bit that we're kind of leading to is talking about saying, so like I was teaching somebody some knots the other day, and I found myself saying, can you see my hands? Because they weren't looking at my hands. Didn't need them to look at my face. I needed them to see where my hands were going. Or like, you know, say to my son all the time, like, can you see just left of that thing, just over here? Because, and here's the crystallization, I'm not the important bit. But in those settings where the person who's saying, look at me, their mentality is already that they are the important person in the conversation. So it follows that they would think, this child needs to look at me.
Well, that goes hand in hand with the Gavin Williamson speech about the expert in the front of the, you know, at the front of the class imparting information into people's brains. It's like, if you have that view of education, then you are going to go along that, look at me because I am the important thing, and watching my mouth and hearing my words and embedding them into your tiny brain.
Do you think it's a forest school thing to kind of reflect that as the leader, you're very rarely the important thing? So for most of what we do at forest school, not I don't want the kids to look at me, because I love the attention, my ego. But, you know, most of the time I think we are going, we're not the important bit here. Can you see so-and-so is sad? You know, I'm not going, look at me, you're going to get a detention if you don't stop what you're doing right now. We're going, that's the important thing, focus on that thing. And I think that comes more naturally at forest school. Or the birds are over there, or the mud kitchen's that way, or watch out the swings there.
Yes.
I'm not going, whereas in a classroom I think you are more inclined to eyes on me, here's the information.
Stop, oh no, it's snowing, crap. Stop looking out the window at the snow.
Stop, I'll drop the blinds.
Shut out the things.
To the point where teachers will stand in front of a whiteboard. Do you remember, were you there when they had to like, there was like a thing, you're not allowed to stand in front of the projectors for more than 20 minutes because when the projectors were all up on the ceilings, and then they would do the thing, and then they would screensaver blue, and teachers weren't like turning them off or moving out the way, they were just teaching in front of it with like this weird blue man group look. And there was like people's eyes up.
Really?
Because you're just standing, because
teachers' eyes or children's
teachers' eyes.
Right.
Because you're staring into this blue bulb for however long a day.
Wow.
I think that's right. That might be absolute horseshit. But I know there was a thing where I was told on my teaching course, don't, like, either turn it off or stand to the side. Sorry, I was just thinking about where kids look and teachers. Teachers
get a raw deal, man. Like,
I really do.
Deafness was a thing, especially like when I was on my teacher training, teaching drama in inner London secondary schools, and my teacher trainer was deaf in one ear from teaching drama in inner London secondary school, because the noise level and the noise level that you just accept as normal, because you're going, okay, cool, guys, we'll get into groups and do this thing and like make up this thing, and you've got people acting out like the most insane kind of like jungle attack, like it's 24 hours a day, just day after day after day till you're deaf. Like, brilliant. Anyway, back to the book. So moving beyond eye contact, chapter 3. So the examples she gives are, for example, to kind of encourage visual referencing. Instead of saying, like, she gives an example of her kids playing with Lego, and then one of her children like rolling all over the Lego pieces. And
he's like sat on the Lego, isn't he?
Yeah, for whatever reason he needs to get off of there. So instead of saying move back or get off the Lego, which I'm sure we've all said to our own children,
move back, get off the Lego.
It's the end of the day. Get off the Lego, put your pyjamas on.
The way you said it sounded like a SWAT team kicking the door. Move back, get off the
Lego. So she says, your body's on top of the pieces. And then just waits. And then quite a few seconds of like the kid going, huh?
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
And she says that
oh,
noise.
The huh. Yeah.
That's great. If you hear a huh, then it means something is happening in the brain to go then, okay, I'm out of whatever moment I was in. Now I'm looking at my body. Now I'm looking at where my body is in space. And then I have to make a decision about what I do next. Yeah. And in the same way as you might talk about allowing time after you've asked a question, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you know when you've asked a question and you feel like half an hour's gone past before anyone speaks. Yeah. In fact, it's like half a second. She says like give time. So then problem solving, etc. And she talks about other examples of visual referencing in a playground. She's with a child who has social learning challenges, who spends a lot of time in the playground by themselves, and she uses visual referencing with this child says, I wonder what the other kids are doing. And so the child won't feel pressure to do anything specific that would create worry or anxiety, and they have space to simply scan the playground with you, and then you can guide further as needed. You can say, I see them right over by the sandbox. Then you can take the opportunity to help the child understand what they're seeing. It looks like they're playing at the sandbox. I can see them filling up a dump truck with sand and pouring it into a bucket. You are guiding the child to visually reference, helping them know where to look, and then helping them understand or derive meaning from what they are seeing, all using declarative statements. Then you can take it a step further if you want and say, I wonder if you'd like to join them. So it's just an invitation. If they say no or don't respond, that's fine. But it's just I'm
just wondering whether it... sorry, I was listening to you. I was also going in my head about... two parts. One is saying that... Because I think the initial way that you might rephrase that, it would be to get a child's attention and then to say, what are the other children doing? Which... On the surface, it sounds like you're doing the declarative language, but it isn't.
It's questions.
Because it's questions, and I think that's worth kind of highlighting that
definitely
it's not about saying what are the other children doing. It has to be a statement of I wonder.
Well,
X. And
she's got a whole chapter on the nuts and bolts, and the learning I took away from that really was like questions are not declarative; they are imperative language. And it made me reflect on my teacher training, which, questions were talked about so
we said, didn't
much.
We, that
and
like
even in
early
forest
years.
school, actually. Even in forest school, there was a thing doing around the other day about types of questions. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really useful. So I'm not saying that like questions are evil and shouldn't exist, but this book is kind of saying overloading children with questions all the time is like it's demanding an answer and it's demanding some kind of action. And if you're really looking at like a child-led setting, so she gives examples like, what should you do? Or what are you missing? What do you need? All those kind of questions where as a practitioner you might think, those are great questions. Like,
and when we were running the kindergarten, that's what we were really, because we thought Ofsted was looming and you just go, oh, that's how that's
further learning.
I'll further it with this stuff. I'll further it with questions. I think I've told you the story about when I was doing my teacher training and somebody was talking to me about guided reading.
Yes.
And this thing of, you set a group. It's 15 minutes after lunch, whatever. You work with one group and the other groups read, and then you sit down with the group and after they've read, or even just so you can. One way of doing this is that you do it verbally, where you sit down and you kind of are supposed to ask these questions of like, who's the main character and why do you think Sam is feeling sad about this, or like what is Sophie missing, or those written comprehension questions that are like describe the three main. And the person that was on, I did this. I know it wasn't my teacher training; it was a CPD thing. And he just went, if you were sat in the lounge reading a book and your partner came up to you and asked you even one of those questions, you'd probably tell them to fuck off. Like if you were halfway through a book and your partner kept going, who's the main character in that book you're reading? You'd be like, it's not an adult book. You wouldn't like it. And just like. It would just interrupt flow. Yeah. So if you have any concept of flow, you have to realise that questions are the opposite of flow.
And especially in a classroom setting where you spend a hell of a lot of time trying to get kids into flow. You're like, I just really want them to engage with the book and just not get distracted by stuff. And then you get that moment of like, everyone is really engaged, and then you think, shit, everyone's really quiet and they're just doing their own thing. I'm not doing anything. I need to ask some questions.
And that's where it comes in, isn't it? And that's where, like we were saying at the start, what are you providing me to forest school? We had a thing where it was getting towards the end of the day and we were going to do our gratitudes, and somebody was reading a book here, and I think it must have been you had howled, which is the signal for everybody to come back, and they didn't stop reading the book. And I had the process in my head of going like, that person's not stopped reading their book. And I inhaled to say like, all I was gonna do is, Gemma's howled, declarative, great, well done me. But I realised that she knew what was going on, but it was just insane to be like, really wish kids would, everyone wants kids to read, everyone thinks it's so important, but that we want them to do it in a way that means at the drop of a hat they will stop. Yeah. You go, you need to get into flow, you need to do all these things you need to do, but only within the realm. When I want you to stop at anything, you should be ready to do it.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
It is insane.
And then people go, well, the alternative is you go, well, I gave him like a 5-minute warning, or I gave him a 2-minute, which for some kids is even more anxiety inducing, because then you don't enjoy the last 5 minutes because you're just going 5 minutes, and maybe 5 minutes isn't enough, maybe 1 minute's enough, maybe just like when you get to the end of what you're doing.
I know.
But that doesn't work when the school bell goes.
Well, exactly. That's another like practitioner thing about giving warnings. Like it's behaviour management technique, isn't it? It's like, this child always kicks off at this certain time. Have you tried giving them a warning, or giving them a stand time, or a countdown clock, so that they know when the
Can we create a character who is like this slightly patronising, like parenting behaviour management? Have you gone on a parenting course? Huh?
Have you been on a that person? That person.
What do you think this character's name is?
I don't know. I need some time to think about it. The name Brenda immediately came into my head, and I was like, no, that's kind of sexist. Like, it's probably a man. Anyway, moving on. That's not sexist at all, is it? That's probably a man. Probably.
Get back to the book.
Michael Gove.
Get out.
Gavin Williamson. That should just be a swear word. Gavin Williamson.
Absolute Gavin.
Shall we talk about episodic memory? Social competence.
Yes!
Okay, chapter 4.
This is a side note. We put up bird feeders yesterday, and the one over there is half full already.
Oh, wow.
They have been going absolutely mental for it. It's been very enjoyable to watch.
Because we did have them before, but they were far away from main camp, so...
And they didn't get eaten there.
No.
But we've moved them to near the main camp, which you would think the wildlife would have gone, we steer clear of the main camp.
Yeah.
But no, they love it.
And we get to enjoy them.
Yes.
Whee!
Episodic memory.
Episodic memory is what we
Attention
use
span.
to recall memories or past experiences that are relevant in the here and now. Brain goes through its internal Rolodex system to go, I've been through this situation before, which we said again ties into the whole brain child when somebody has like a
finishing the narrative thing.
Yeah, traumatic experience, gets stuck in that place, and you can help them by going, yes, but then what happened in the end? It was all okay. We put a plaster on your knee, and then someone made you laugh, and then you went off playing, and it was okay, or whatever. So accepting that some learners have sort of lagging skills. I will use the sort of Ross Green sentence there about with episodic memory. So you as a practitioner can help them to both create those memories and access them. And this was the controversial bit. So
okay.
Yeah. So you can say like this is non-controversial. A child is like freaking out about their homework. And you can say, I remember last time you forgot your homework at school, we emailed your teacher. Or I remember this happened before and we did XYZ. I remember this happened before. Or this reminds me of a game we already know. This reminds me of something. And then so you're not telling them.
No, it's declarative, like, blah, blah, blah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's like, I remember.
Yeah. It's declarative, but it's also... because this is like the game we played yesterday. It's kind of like declarative, but you're missing maybe asking them to access.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you say this reminds me of a game where we already know, and then if that doesn't work, then you can give more information. So it is kind of inviting them to recall episodic memory. But the controversial thing
Can I just before we get to it, because I think it's really so. The episodic memory thing is about saying there are similarities between this situation and the situation you've been in before.
Yeah.
And the really good example in this book is like going to a supermarket in another country, and this author is saying that if you had no episodic memory, the fact that anything is different in this other supermarket would mean that you would completely freak out because you wouldn't have any frame of reference.
Yeah.
As it is, we're all already using our episodic memory to go, they have trolleys, like we have trolleys. They have aisles, like we have aisles. I probably pay with money, like we probably pay. You know, you're pulling all those things in already, but for children or learners that can't access their episodic memory, they have no reference. Because this isn't the Tesco next to their house, this may as well be, you know, the Asda down the road may as well be a foreign country where everything's in a different, you know.
And how anxiety inducing is that? Terrifying.
So that's I really liked that as an example, because then you apply it to, you know, we're playing a game, we're playing it like we did yesterday, and if you haven't got the memory of what you did yesterday, or you haven't,
or you need help accessing that, you need help to remind yourself,
or you changed school, or you've, you know, and you haven't got the episodic memory to go, uniforms are probably the same, this is probably the same, the teacher probably stands there like this, or like, you know, we're going to a different forest school. We're going out to forest school, but we're going to go to a different place today. We're going to cook it in this way. We're going to we're going to change a tiny thing, and that just wipes the slate clean. But sorry, do the controversial one.
No, yeah, I was just going to say something else. Also, I was just thinking about, like, if you're working with a young person who seems to have like repeated behaviours that you kind of think like, oh, I thought we'd sorted that out. Do you know what I mean? Like, how come this is still a problem, or how come there still seem to be like repeated every time this happens? It's like, well, if that child hasn't got enough help accessing their episodic memory, then that might be why you see repeated patterns of behaviour, because it hasn't been remembered in a way that's like, oh, it's okay, it's going to be okay because last time.
So to use the example from before, one, flipping it from what at the end of break, let's say, flipping it from what are the other children doing to I wonder what the other children are doing is taking it to declarative. If you didn't get anything from there, accessing the episodic bit would be then to no one in particular going, I remember yesterday when all the children lined up, and you stood behind Jake, and just leaving it. That's then going like, here's a bit of episodic memory and giving the learner a chance to go, maybe there's a thing like that today. Maybe I can do the same thing.
Exactly. So she gives an example of kids fighting over who is going to go first.
Would never happen. Unrealistic.
There's a swing. There's only one swing of that type here.
That is literally when we do any design management of our woods, when we're like, we'll put this up, everything we're like, okay, but we can't just have one. Or this can't be a single.
What is the strategy going to be? Because there is only one of this thing, and there can be only one.
Take it down.
Yeah, so that's our episodic memory working really well. Check us out.
Yeah.
You know, I remember last time this happened, this really upset so and so. So how can we, help with that? So the imperative language would focus on the challenging behaviour, the arguing, trying to stop it. So stop arguing, no arguing, stop that. Be quiet, or whatever. Whereas,
or making a decision, coming in and going like, you're going today. You're doing whatever.
So using declarative language to encourage the kids to recall shared memories of their play. For example, you could say, I remember Johnny went first when we played the last game, so I'm thinking it would be most fair to let David go first this time. You can then also plant seeds for future retrieval. Let's remember together that when we start another game, it will be Johnny's turn to go first again. So the controversial thing we spoke about was that the adult there is kind of solving the situation.
We said I think the first half is good. I remember last time that, I forget the names, Johnny went first. I think if you'd stop the example there, perfect. But it's that thing of like I was saying, acknowledging that everything you want to do, or I want to do, is intentional, also comes, and like we talked at the start about reflecting that I might be a threat. Not, people might perceive me as a threat. Children might perceive me as a threat. Comes this idea that like when you, in a school setting or an authoritative setting, wonder things, I'm using air quotes, wonder things out loud, that is just going to get interpreted as a thing. Like, like, I wonder if you could share it with Sophie with like extreme eye contact is the same as going, fucking share it. Fucking share it. Because you're 3 times the size of most kids. Not you personally. One is bigger than kids. You're already in a position where you have more power than them. You have to be mindful, I think, that anything you pose has more weight. So try and, if you want to do that, to try and go, I'm not going to suggest anything, which we got stuck on last week, and we both had basically the same conversation with the same group of children, and it was one of the most difficult things because it was just, there was a project, and one person wanted to do something next, one person wanted to do the other thing next, and neither could see the other side, and neither would back down or capitulate, compromise in it. But we weren't suggesting compromise. It was just about going like, can you hear what they're saying? Can you hear what they're saying? And because I knew if I said, actually, I'm on this team, or hey, here's some facts that kind
and it's
of
almost like
up.
They were looking at us to do that. So they were able to kind of express that they needed help, and it was getting quite heated. So I went in first, didn't I? And I was like.
And I caught the side, and I just went like, I'm just leaving.
Let's hear this, and okay. And it got to the point where I did have to intervene by saying, I wonder if it might be better for you each to talk to me rather than to each other, because every time they were kind of addressing each other with their ideas, then that was when it kind of escalated and got really heated, and there was extreme eye contact going on. Well, that's that thing
about the visual referencing, where like there can be negative visual referencing, where if you're trying to make your point, but the person that you're looking at is rolling their eyes, is doing whatever, then you lose track of what you're saying.
And that's what happened. That was what happening.
Like, fucking stop.
Can you change your tone of voice when you're talking to me? It's like, okay, well let's remove that element. The emotional element there, by if you address me and I reflectively listen and go, oh, okay, so and so thinks that blah 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 blah, and then there was one person on the outskirts who wasn't saying anything but had been involved in the project, and so I was like, I kind of want to be able to invite them to speak, but in a declarative way, so they don't feel the pressure that they have to. So I just said, I wonder if so and so has any ideas about what we should do. Turned out they probably did, but the kind of social sort of implications of vocalising their opinion at that step the stakes were too high. So that was really challenging. And then, but yeah, just very, very aware, as you said, of if you say the equivalent of, I remember they went first last time, so maybe the fairest thing would be to do this. Like, you're going to solve the problem because they are going to go with what you suggest because they like you and respect you, and you are the the adult in the situation. But then you are completely taking away the problem solving.
Stripping the learning.
Even if you phrase it in the most like, you could do, casual, you could do this if you wanted to. It's just my suggestion.
And some of those things we talked about, like in OK Not to Share, they have the scripts at the back. But I think, again, what that book and this book are missing is some like stage directions. So like, so in that scenario of the, someone wants to go first, just going, I remember last time Johnny went first, and leave, right? Don't then stand there, eye contact, because that's a lot of where you're, like, physically your presence is what then stops your words just being like an ethereal idea in the air. The fact that you stand there and wait, children are sort of programmed to then go, they probably want a response to that, don't they? Which is
well, this leads on to the next chapter, which is all about appreciating different opinions. So one significant social learning challenge for a lot of people being taking the perspective of others, which is incredibly hard anyway for all of us. And then if you've got social learning challenges, then that's just like next level, really hard. And she says, we don't want to force our views on kids. Instead, we want to create an environment where kids can lower their guard and feel safe to be curious about the thoughts, opinions and feelings of others. We must create a positive backdrop so that kids do not feel threatened when others have a different thought, opinion or feeling. We want them to discover at their own pace that opinions and perspectives are not right or wrong, they're just different. I just think that's so well put. I think that is you know, those things where you're like, well, that should be what education is about. I just think that is, you know, if you were going to invent some new pillars of education, that is one of the pillars for me anyway, isn't it? Because that is how you, if you're thinking about like individual happiness and success on a real base level, you know, the success of a society in the just, it's that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't you think? Because that's tied up with kind of trying to reduce prejudice and hatred, and it's also creating this positive backdrop so that people's ideas are valid, and therefore you're sparking off all kind of creativity and invention, and like it's okay to express this idea or this opinion. I'm not going to be shot down in flames. I can have a positive space to air it, and everyone will go, oh, okay, without going, no, you idiot, that was wrong.
Yeah, there is something there though that I just think is worth couching very slightly, in that I've seen it as a really good webcomic, but like, if you want to have a completely tolerant community, you cannot tolerate intolerance.
Oh yeah.
So that idea, because
that's
this is where it,
thing.
because it becomes spiraled into like everybody's views need to be heard. The person who is saying, well, my view is that your view shouldn't be heard, that person doesn't get stopped, and then it becomes more people go, well, that, you know, get access to that. So yes, I agree in theory. I think there's some holes that just would need patching somewhere. Yeah. But in an educational setting, because I think what, you know, mostly this is like, hey, conversely to the traditional, you know, Williamson, expert at the front, must be all knowing. You know, that idea that like, no, everybody in this situation is particularly learning, is supposed to be a space where you can get things a bit wrong. Yeah.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Yeah, so she's kind of talking about not only kind of commenting on different opinions within the sort of learning community, but also facilitating a space where that's really addressed. So she's even given an example of like an opinion grid where they kind of actually document different children's responses to a particular smell. And it's like, oh, this is really, like, just sort of celebrating that and going, oh, that's really, you know, we feel differently that way. You think that smell is really disgusting, and so really loves it. That's really interesting, isn't it? And you can do that as an adult and be honest. Like you were talking about being honest with your children about like your preferences of TV shows.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I'm not going to pretend that I like Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
That's not. You know.
Yeah.
But that,
it's fine that you watch it, but it's not my favourite, so I'm going to go and do something else.
And then you know, these things sort of follow up. But another one was that so my son is about to start a like an after school club. He's not going to school, but he will be starting an after-school club, which I was like, trying to sort of highlight a few things that might be different. And one of the things I said is like, obviously, especially this last year, Forest School has been the place that he's been, where there are children of all ages. And I was kind of going like, oh, those children might only have friends who are the same sort of age as them, but you've got lots of friends, haven't you, who are different ages, or like, call a spade, we've ended up with quite a feral-looking group. All the like, genderless. Everybody that comes here basically has long hair.
That's not really true, but a higher percentage.
More than usual. It is just a group of long-haired feral children, which is just very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And their children have then had some interesting conversations about like, this person's got long hair, but they're I mean, I don't want to make it out like our group is some sort of utopia, but we've genuinely had children going like, but they want to be a she, but they've got this hair, or like, but they look more like a boy than me, and I'm a hair, you know. Yeah. They've had those conversations, and in no way have any of the children got uptight about it, or you know, split into groups because of it, or done anything. They've just kind of gone like, all right, should we go run? Yeah. So there's some stuff at the back, isn't there, that you were saying when you get to the end of the book and you think you've finished it.
Yeah, you kind of think, oh yeah, I get this whole thing. There's a troubleshooting bit about I seem to be using declarative language, but it's not really had any kind of effect. So she's saying you want to check that you're giving enough processing time, attention. So is your child actually attending to your language at that time? And if not, what is what could help them attend better? Comprehension and habit are all things that you might want to look at and go, are all those things okay? Maybe they're not in the habit of listening to this sort of speaking style and they need time to adjust. So it's not like, you suddenly start using declarative language with your class or your kids or whatever. Don't expect it to be like an instant success necessarily. And then she gives some practice bits. So there is a word bank and helpful words to keep in mind. So like verbs like think, notice, hear, wonder, decide, I bet, feel, all those kind of things that you might want to start a declarative statement with. And then she gives you some things to turn into declaratives, some imperatives to turn into declaratives. And you get to that bit and you're like, oh, that's really hard.
You realise you've not really taken the book in. You've got to go back to the beginning.
Completely. And it made me question even things like we go, wash your hands, it's time for a snack.
I think that's been going around in my head.
It's time for a snack. Which started at kindergarten.
Yeah.
We just used to make up loads of funny little songs all the time. And
I think that is one of our ways of making, and we do it, I was saying the other day, when something is I think it's a coping mechanism both of us have. It's like
potential tense situation turn into a song.
Yeah. And I do it with my wife as well. Yeah. Because it's really hard to start a fight when what you're doing is walking around going, fucking clean the kitchen, there's shit everywhere. Because you can't have a go at that person. Or it's doubly annoying. It's a real gamble.
Completely. Oh, completely. I used to have a it's time to get up, it's time to get up, it's time. Increase you know how your phone alarm increases in volume.
Oh yeah, just
wake up, and that used to be my my little wake up song until I realised that, oh my god, that was not the answer. Oh, you shut up, Mum, shut up. But in my head it was like, reduce the tension, do not make it imperative, get up now, turn it into a song. It's like, no, it's still imperative. Just because you're singing it doesn't mean that it's not imperative.
Is that in the book? That's one of the chapters. Just because you're singing it.
Just because you're singing it doesn't mean
Can I tell you about my story? So when you were singing your wake up, it's time to wake up song has reminded me. I once went on a let's call it a camping retreat thing, and the chap that was running it had lots of ideas about what to do, and it was quite guided and whatever. And one of his ideas was that he liked to. It was only one night. He liked to wake everybody up in the morning so that the day could kind of start at the right, to everybody collectively. So you don't end up with that weird camping thing where someone gets up at 4 because they've got kids and someone gets up at 10 because they've got whatever. But his idea was that he would he would wander sort of round the tents, playing Morning Has Broken on a violin.
Right.
I don't know if he'd played the violin before, but it didn't sound
lovely.
So it was as intense. So I was already awake, but for some people they go good morning everyone.
Delicious. Wow.
Really, but
I was woken up by a didgeridoo once at Glastonbury. That was actually quite pleasant. Oh. Just the noise of a didgeridoo.
How close was it? Because I imagine
close. No, it wasn't aggressive. It was nice. It was a nice way. The best way to be woken up, of course, is for someone to just pull open your eyelids.
Is that what you're doing?
You've ever done that? Just pull their eyelids open. Oh, no. So kind.
That's horrendous.
Okay, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
I've got a big question. This book made me think of a question. The question was, it's a statement, agree, disagree, discuss. The statement is, we should only, underlined, we should only use our position of authority to keep people, nature and possessions safe. So I'm talking about in a in a education-y, practitioner-y setting.
Yeah.
Not in a life setting.
And by safe,
I mean emotionally safe, not just physically safe.
This is weird. You've already asked me this question. I've forgotten.
I know.
Do you know what it is? I've forgotten my answer, but it feels a bit like I'm running a train. Like I know the tracks are there, and I feel like I'm going to answer exactly the same way, which is quite good, I suppose.
Do you know probably why? It was because your answer probably went waffle, because that's what we do on this podcast.
Oh.
We just, I'm not saying about you, it's both of us. What is that noise? Nothing. Continue.
Gemma has lost the plot.
There's a weird noise.
Ow.
So go on, should we? Yes.
Should we? Okay,
no.
And we're talking emotionally.
You can just say yes or no and then that'll be the end.
No, because that's what happens. If someone asks you a yes or no question, you answer with every word that you know except yes or no.
Go for it.
Oh, so I now remember that my thoughts were about a safety scenario, like keeping someone safe. And we talked about striking when the iron is cold and saying that, let's take a car park for an example, where your child like runs off and you need to use your authority.
That is in the book. Is it ever okay to be imperative?
Okay, so the first time it happens, yes, I think it is okay. If you couldn't have foreseen the circumstances and you couldn't have predicted that, because the world is fluid and changeable and whatever, and you end up in situations where you go, they just walked into the road and I needed to hold on to them, or I needed to say no, stop, right? But then I think what you would then need to do, if I was following my own sort of parenting education philosophy, would be then to have a conversation at a quieter time, emotionally, about, so when that happens again, this might be the thing, and this is how we keep safe, so that hopefully there wouldn't have to be a second time that I needed to be imperative, because as we were getting towards, let's say it's the car park, my episodic memory would probably kick in and would probably go, I should remind them about that chat we had, so that their episodic memory can kick in, so that then you approach that situation. If you're repeatedly needing to be imperative, something is going wrong. Whether that's something like the person that you're with doesn't have any access to their episodic memory, or you don't have access to your episodic memory, because that's just as valid, isn't it? It's like, if you constantly, like if your morning routine is crap every day, and you arrive at work or you arrive at school like, God, this was awful, then like that is a kind of thing to go, maybe your episodic memory isn't kicking in here, that you try, even if it doesn't fix it, to go, but I tried a different thing today because I was aware that it might happen again, or I tried a different thing. So I think yes. I think yes, it is okay to be authoritative in unforeseen situations. Yeah.
What I was also thinking about with that question is that, so kind of going back to what you were saying about everything being intentional, and what she's saying about, like, as adults we don't want to force our opinions onto children, and that we're doing that subconsciously all the time by being bigger, by being the grown-up. That the book made me more aware of times when it isn't necessarily a danger situation. It is just a situation where you can make a choice. You can be intentional about it and facilitate something in as non-authoritative way as possible, or not. Do you know what I mean? And that, like, if you're running a setting, you have that choice about how much authority, in inverted commas, you have. So, and that will feel different for different people, and that's fine. That's like a scale, right? So some people will still be doing forest school, but they will be doing it in a kind of like, everybody gather round, we're going to go and look for birds now, and what we're going to do is look for birds, and I've got this like tick sheet here, and we're going to look. So that might be an example of authority, like you are leading an activity, is forest school.
It's like didactic.
Yes, that kind of, but didactic with, like, because you can't escape the fact that you carry authority because you're a grown up, so or just like laying down of rules, or even if your kind of rules are that you want to create a really fair and equitable learning community, but you are the authority laying down those things. Yeah. So if you
could just set communism up, right?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's
I do what you mean.
Questioning through, because the book is all about language, and language is so powerful, and the way that you can phrase things, and whether you're doing things in a manipulative way, or because we spoke of that as well about some of the things that we say to help children. Sometimes, especially if they're quite a new thing to us, you think, oh God, am I being really manipulative here? And you might feel that with this. It just might feel really alien to you that you're doing it, and it's not your natural speech, so it's not just coming out spontaneously. It is like this might feel really false, and like I'm using a weird script, but that's kind of your problem.
I realised that. This is a reflection that I had with you yesterday, because we had talked about a thing and a way to talk to someone, and you had shared it with me, and I had gone, I had taken it on board, and the same similar situation arose, and I tried it. It's probably something for another podcast.
Yeah.
I tried it, and it worked. And it worked scarily well. And that freaked me out. Yeah. I didn't like it. Yeah. And then I was thinking about this since. And I realised that I think that is almost full circle from having left teaching. One of the things that I found was like a journey that I needed to go on inside Forest School was having been a teacher and all the authority things that come with being a teacher. When you start doing Forest School, when I started doing Forest School, it was like doing school outside. In that when I asked something, it was done because I have the authority. And then it started to be this weird kind of thing of like, oh, not all the children. No, one boy didn't do the thing that I asked, or that one. And then in a couple of months you go, do I really mind if those don't?
Exactly.
No, maybe I don't. And it got to the point where someone doing what I asked freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah.
Right? So that's such a weird journey to have gone on.
But you are judged in teaching about how much authority you have. And authority doesn't necessarily mean like shouting and having like that kind of... No. But, but people would talk about like teaching styles of like, oh, even a really softly spoken teacher can have like a lot of authority, and that's a good thing. Whereas if you're looking at like a holistic learning community of any kind, doesn't necessarily have to be Forest School, then those... I think, in my mind, I'm kind of travelling on this journey where those lines are just blurred, and then there is a...
Would it change if you reframed it as power dynamic?
Yeah.
If you said a quiet teacher can still have a very high-low power dynamic with their class. Or
it still creates a really strong hierarchy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Everyone really knows that they're at the top of the tree and they're all at the bottom, And like that... Do you know what I mean, though? That's what it is. That's the journey, isn't it? And so there's a difference between just not giving a shit and being dangerous and just letting the kids do what the heck they want, and being reckless and having no authority in that way. But there is a model, if I could describe it as like an ideal thing, it's like you are the adult, you can't escape from that, and you accept all the benefits that brings to the community in terms of creating a safe space where that the kids know and that you're on it, you're observant, you can step in to keep people safe, in whether that's emotionally or physically, because you have more access to episodic memory, you have more strength in your body.
You have more episodic memories.
Yes,
that's just one of the things, isn't it?
You have more problem-solving skills because you've been alive longer, and therefore you can use all of those great benefits and feel grateful for those, and the group is grateful for those because you can step in if needed to give those gifts to the group, to keep everybody safe and relaxed, and to facilitate a space which is the best it can be. But you are, as much as apart from that, you are one of the learners, you are a member of the community, and actually your ideas, if it's just an idea rather than a safety issue, I'm including again emotional safety in that. If it's not anything to do with a safety idea, then your idea holds as much weight as the 3-year-old's idea. Because why? Because why not? Like, if you're all agreed about the reason you're there, which I think we are,
and that your motivation is as important as the learner's motivation. That's where I would see, because your motivation could be you're going to get chewed out by SLT, or your motivation might be to cover the curriculum, or to, you know, that this thing's in season. But the fact that something is interesting to someone else is as valid as a reason as a motivation as your thing is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just because yours has got a bit of paperwork behind it.
Yeah.
Or a, you know.
Yeah.
But that is really tough.
Yeah.
That is really tough, and that is one where, like we said, reflecting back on yourself and what your role is, and whether you are the important bit, and when you are the important bit, or how important you are all the time is.
But I think
it's just hard.
It's really, really hard work, and that's what. And when you realise that, then it makes you have less of that guilt feeling of like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. And I think I could only come to this realisation, A, at this point of doing forest school for this long, and B, after reading as much as we read, and having that backup. Because if I just walked in week 1 of forest school and went, actually, I'm not going to tell the children what to do because I'm just like, blah, 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 then that is kind of a cop-out.
Because it's just surface understanding.
Do you know what I mean? Then I think that is when dangerous things happen. Because I think that you can step in straight away and go, forest school is child-led, so I'm actually not going to like tell them, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And you haven't got the experience and... Sorry, this sounds really big-headed. This sounds like...
No.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. It's like that they would appear the same.
Yes.
Two practitioners both not stepping into a situation, but one not stepping in because they have, you know, done 6 weeks forest school, they know that it's child-led, and one going, you know, I understand all the processes that are going on, and I'm actually monitoring about 8 different things right now, and I'm seeing, but they look the same, but the outcome isn't the same.
Yes.
One thing that really helps me is, like you say, with reading all this stuff, quite often by the time I've thought it through, the situation's gone. Like, I'm just there going like, oh, okay, so they've done that, and they've done that, and then the kids like,
how should I respond to that? The moment's fine. Yeah, I completely know what you mean. Yeah.
I'm thinking about it and going, okay, but my authority is here, and maybe but I'm standing on the higher ground, but then read
how could I phrase that in the declarative way? Oh, I don't need to because
it's gone.
And that is something that's definitely dawned on me recently. It's just like, just shut up. Just don't say anything.
And that is facilitating the time though, isn't it? Yeah. That's not shut up because...
For me. I mean, I'm telling myself to shut up.
Yeah, that's not us...
I'm not telling the kids to shut up.
Shut up, what I think.
Yeah.
Shush, stand still. Everybody stand still. Yeah, it is a really good book. It's a really bare bones book.
It's quick to read.
Quick to read and very applicable. Say that word for me.
Applicable.
There we go. Applicable.
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 Applicable. Doing a hand gest, making rude hand gestures at me. Straight away, like you could read it one or because the chapters are kind of discrete. They link, but you could just read the bit about eye contact and go, cool, eye contact's going to be my focus for another couple of days, and put it in straight away. And it's a good one for people who haven't got lush Parisian time to reflect and...
Parisian time?
You know, just like just sit around.
Yeah. But it is also, I would put it on my list of absolute must books of like, you know, you're doing forest school training or... Yeah,
any trainers, level 3 people.
I would...
Students or teachers.
Yeah, just read it.
Read it because it would do, and it would allow you to do one of the things that I think a lot of people are trying to do is bring the forest school ethos to other scenarios, and I think this book would help you unpick what is in your forest school ethos to then realise what you want to take forward. Yes. We made it!
Did it! Well,
we did it!
Did it record?
Mine recorded.
So did mine.
Yeah!
13 minutes.
Bye guys.
Bye!
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.